to everyone for making this such a special evening. I want to say a few words.
The proclamation of the new reign had barely finished echoing across London before King William signed his very first executive decree, leaving the entire palace in complete shock. Within 90 minutes of taking the throne, the new monarch initiated a swift administrative purge that stripped extended family members of their lifelong privileges by noon. Armed security details were abruptly canceled, state-funded properties were locked down, and non-working relatives were given a brutal deadline to pack their bags. As courtiers struggle to process the sheer speed of the transition, the court faces a ruthless new era that permanently resets the boundaries of royal power. The Midnight Warrant, the great seal of the realm, pressed down into the thick red wax at exactly 12:15 in the morning. King William sat at the head of the oak council table inside the guard chamber at Windsor Castle, his fountain pen still uncapped in his right hand. Across from him stood the Lord President of the Council and two senior High Court judges, who had been summoned to the palace by an unscheduled, high-security motor escort less than an hour prior. The wind outside beat against the historic stone battlements, but the room itself was deathly quiet. With a single nod, the new king pushed the document forward, officially registering his very first executive decree before the public even knew the transition of power had occurred. The legal mechanism behind this late-night signing was an immediate sweeping revision of the sovereign prerogative household statutes. Under British constitutional framework, a newly acceded monarch possesses a unique, narrow window of absolute legislative authority to restructure the internal governance of the royal court without clearing the changes through a standard parliamentary committee vote. King William utilized this raw constitutional power instantly, bypassing centuries of traditional notice periods. The document he signed was a highly restrictive operational warrant that systematically targeted the administrative loopholes previously used by non-working and extended family members. The physical reality of this executive order hit the Central Palace Security Hub at Buckingham Palace within 15 minutes of the signature. The master of the household entered the subterranean IT command center, accompanied by two officers from the government communications headquarters. They carried an encrypted digital token containing the new king's authentication codes. The specialists spent 45 minutes systematically deactivating the high-security palace access cards, remote database portals, and private communication lines previously allocated to over 40 extended relatives and honorary advisors. By 1 in the morning, their physical and digital entry lanes into the working core of the monarchy were completely severed. This sudden administrative freeze sent immediate waves of panic through the residential quarters of Kensington Palace. Several long-serving courtiers, who had managed the diaries of the previous administration's inner circle, were woken by urgent notifications on their secure mobile devices. Their official security clearances had been downgraded to civilian status while they slept. The new king's chief of staff made it clear through an automated internal memo that the palace would no longer finance, support, or house any individual who did not hold an active, full-time public role within the direct line of succession. The era of casual court privilege was dismantled before the first dawn of the new reign. The tension turned concrete at the outer security gates of the Windsor estate by 6 in the morning. A fleet of plainclothes royalty protection vehicles arrived at the perimeter checkpoints, carrying new physical instruction logs for the guard details on duty. The orders explicitly revoked the long-term state-supported bodyguard allocations for non-lineal relatives. The guards were instructed to deny automatic entry to any vehicle that did not bear the new king's gold accession pass, forcing several extended family members who lived within the grace and favor cottages to queue at the public gates like ordinary visitors. The rapid implementation of these restrictions introduced a profound mystery into the palace legal department. Standard royal transitions are traditionally characterized by months of slow-moving handovers, courtesy notice periods, and symbolic family compromises designed to maintain a public appearance of unity. King William's team completely abandoned this traditional protocol. The speed and precision of the Midnight Warrant suggested that his legal advisors had been quietly drafting, vetting, and sealing these restrictive clauses for over a year, waiting for the exact moment of accession to execute a total administrative cleansing. The mystery of why the new king chose to act with such immediate, uncompromising aggression was resolved by a quick audit of the private family trust ledgers from the previous fiscal quarter. The auditing team discovered that a significant portion of the revenue generated by the Duchy of Lancaster land rents had been quietly earmarked by the previous administration to establish a permanent endowment fund for non-working royals. The fund would have guaranteed millions of pounds in private subsidies for decades, keeping those relatives financially dependent on the crown while giving them zero public accountability. William had discovered the secret transaction and used his very first hours of sovereign authority to permanently cancel the endowment, clawing the millions back into the central treasury. This financial intervention opened an even larger question regarding the long-term status of the California branch of the family. The third page of the Midnight Warrant contained a highly specific restricted clause that dealt exclusively with the commercial exploitation of royal titles outside the United Kingdom. The text laid down a rigid constitutional boundary. Any individual living outside the active working core of the monarchy who attempted to utilize their historic titles, family crests, or palace associations to secure commercial media contracts or corporate sponsorships would face an immediate automatic freeze on their remaining private UK asset distributions. The legal lines were now completely absolute, the security framework was reallocated, and the new king's authority was firmly established before the Morning Press Corps even assembled in London. The parallel networks of influence that had operated in the background of the court for a generation were completely starved of their administrative and financial resources in a single night. The next phase of the transition was already taking shape within the state apartments of Buckingham Palace, where Queen Catherine's new administrative team was preparing to execute a comprehensive, high-security audit of the sovereign jewelry vaults to finalize the new hierarchy of the realm. Changing of the guard. The large mahogany double doors of the Privy Purse office at Buckingham Palace swung open at exactly 8 in the morning. King William's newly appointed master of the household walked inside, carrying an aluminum briefcase. 3 senior accountants from the Royal Auditing Department immediately took their seats around the central conference table. On the table sat a printed stack of the royal household payroll manifests from the previous fiscal quarter. The master of the household unlatched his briefcase and removed a single sheet of paper bearing the new king's red accession stamp. The legal document was an immediate termination order for independent contractors. Under royal financial guidelines, a new sovereign possesses the absolute authority to restructure the staff budgets of all active royal palaces upon their first day on the throne. This process is designed to ensure that the public sovereign grant funds are spent strictly on core monarchical operations. King William used this financial mechanism to target the bloated network of external consultants, interior designers, and public relations advisors hired by the previous administration. The first major cancellation hit the desk of the Royal Estate Coordinator by 8:30. A highly lucrative design contract for the remodeling of the private staterooms at Windsor Castle was terminated on the spot. The contract was held by an upscale interior design firm, managed by a close associate of Camilla's sister, Annabel Elliot. The firm had spent 4 months drafting plans for a complete aesthetic overhaul of the historic apartments. The new order canceled the project instantly, freezing all pending payouts and requiring the design team to return their palace security access badges by noon. The swift dissolution of these contracts created immediate tension down in the palace basement offices. The administrative staff spent the morning processing termination notices for 7 high-ranking press officers who had previously managed the public profiles of extended family members. These publicists were ordered to clear their personal belongings from their desks before the afternoon briefing began. The new king's chief of staff made it clear that the palace press machine would no longer issue statements or manage media coverage for individuals outside the direct line of succession. This drastic reduction in personnel changed the operational reality of the court before the end of the morning. The public frequently views the palace as a static institution, where staff members spend their entire careers climbing the ranks. In reality, the administrative staff serves at the direct pleasure of the reigning monarch. King William's immediate personnel sweep proved that his administration would run a lean, hyper-focused corporate operation. The financial resources previously diverted to managing the image of non-blood relatives were permanently reclaimed by the crown. The mystery surrounding this rapid restructuring deepened when the auditors examined the secondary accounts of the Duchy of Lancaster. The ledger showed a series of unusual monthly payments directed to a private logistics firm based in Wiltshire. The firm was tasked with providing anonymous transport and courier services for Camilla's children during major international sporting events. The palace accountants had historically categorized these expenses under the generic heading of estate security liaison fees, keeping them completely hidden from public oversight. The puzzle was quickly solved when the auditing team cross-referenced the transport logs with the private diaries of the former master of the household. The previous sovereign had authorized these payments as a quiet way to subsidize the lifestyles of his stepchildren without using the official public sovereign grant money. King William's team identified the loophole and closed it within his first 3 hours on the throne. The private logistics firm was notified that its services were no longer required, and the funding line was permanently deleted from the duchy accounts. This rapid financial intervention created an immediate problem for the ongoing organization of the king's accession ceremonies. The palace had previously booked a massive catering and event production firm, managed by a relative of Tom Parker Bowles, to handle the VIP receptions at Westminster. The contract was worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. With the new termination orders active, the entire contract was voided. The accession planning committee had to find a replacement firm within 6 hours, forcing them to rely on the standard military catering corps to avoid an operational disaster. The focus of the morning then turned to the physical infrastructure of Buckingham Palace itself. At 11 o'clock, a team of IT specialists from the government communications headquarters arrived at the palace telecommunications hub. They were executing a direct order from Queen Catherine's new administrative director. The team spent 2 hours systematically revoking the encrypted email access accounts and private digital network portals previously used by Camilla's extended family network. Their remote digital access to the royal databases was completely severed. The day closed with the delivery of a new, highly restricted operational handbook to the palace police detail. The handbook laid down a strict new protocol for the handling of private mail and deliveries entering the royal palaces. From that moment on, any package addressed to a non-blood relative would no longer be accepted by the royal mailroom. The items would be returned directly to the sender or rerouted to private addresses outside London. The legal lines were completely absolute. The staff restructuring was finished, and the new king's corporate footprint was firmly established before the afternoon came to an end. The administrative network that had supported Camilla's family for years was completely dismantled in the span of a few hours. The next phase of the transition was already taking shape at the gates of Windsor Castle, where the physical eviction notices were being prepared for immediate delivery to the Grace and Favor cottages. The Windsor Lockout. A Royal Mail motorcycle courier pulled up outside the secure residential courtyard of a quiet estate on the outskirts of the Windsor boundary at precisely noon. The rider did not leave the package in the standard parcel drop. He waited by the black iron gate until Tom Parker Bowles came down the gravel path to sign the digital receiver log. The delivery consisted of a stiff, cream-colored envelope bearing the official emblem of the Crown Estate Commissioners. Inside was a formal notice to vacate the premises, stamped with King William's new legal seal. The letter gave the occupants a hard 30-day deadline to clear their personal property from the building. The legal backing for this notice relied on a thorough restructure of the Grace and Favor Housing Registry. Under the Crown Estate Act, residences located within the historic royal domains are held strictly at the discretion of the reigning sovereign for the use of active Commonwealth representatives and direct working royals. The previous administration had utilized an informal loophole to grant long-term occupancy licenses to Camilla's immediate children and their families. King William used his very first afternoon on the throne to revoke these licenses across the board, reclassifying the properties as administrative assets for the new household staff. The physical reality of the eviction caused an immediate logistical crisis for Laura Lopez at her Wiltshire residence. At 1 in the afternoon, a local moving coordinator arrived at her gates, accompanied by an official from the Royal Collection Trust. They carried a specialized transit container designed to transport high-value historic property. The official presented a legal reclamation order for a set of silver-gilt table candelabra and a 19th-century landscape painting that had been loaned to the property from the royal storage vaults during the previous summer season. The removal team spent 2 hours packing the historic silver into the transit cases under the watchful eye of the local police officers. The itemized list was exceptionally strict, leaving no room for negotiation or delays. The family had to surrender the items on the spot as the truck drove away toward the central depository at Windsor. This sudden reclamation proved that the new king's administration was systematically stripping non-blood relatives of the physical and symbolic trappings of royal life. The era of informal property sharing was completely over. The tension turned concrete when the estate lawyers attempted to challenge the timeline of the eviction order. They argued that under standard British tenant laws, an occupant is entitled to a minimum 60-day notice period before a property can be legally reclaimed. The Crown Estate legal team rejected the argument within 30 minutes. They produced a copy of the original occupancy agreement signed during the previous reign. The text contained a specific sovereign clause stating that all grace and favor licenses terminate automatically upon the demise of the crown or the accession of a new monarch. This brings us to a major financial mystery within the Windsor Land Registry files. The auditing team discovered that the maintenance and utility bills for these specific family residences had been automatically billed to the Duchy of Lancaster account for the past 3 years. The total cost exceeded £200,000 of private revenue. The palace accountants had hidden these expenses under the generic heading of Windsor Perimeter Security Upkeep, ensuring that the public and Parliament remained entirely unaware of the private subsidies. The puzzle was quickly solved when the auditors traced the electronic billing codes back to a private directive signed by the former keeper of the Privy Purse. The previous sovereign had authorized the hidden billing cycle as a way to relieve his stepchildren of the high cost of maintaining historic brick properties. King William's team canceled the arrangement immediately, issuing a retroactive billing demand to Camilla's family for the utility costs incurred during the current fiscal quarter. The family was held directly liable for the debt. The rapid implementation of these eviction orders created immediate panic among the senior courtiers who had aligned themselves with the previous administration. Several high-ranking estate managers who had helped secure the housing licenses for Camilla's children quietly submitted their resignations by 3 p.m. They realized that their positions within the new court were entirely compromised. The new king's chief of staff accepted the resignations instantly, replacing the traditional managers with lean, military-trained logistics officers from the Royal Navy. The focus then shifted to the commercial implications of the property reclamation. Tom Parker Bowles had been using a private home office within the Windsor estate to manage his independent food writing and consulting business. The location provided his commercial ventures with an immense amount of prestige, allowing him to host international culinary investors within the secure gates of a royal domain. The eviction notice meant his business lost its historic backdrop overnight, forcing his team to look for commercial office space in central London at standard market rates. The day ended with the arrival of a structural engineering team at the Windsor Estate cottages. They began installing new electronic keypad locks on the outer gates, rendering the old physical keys completely useless. The moving vans were already booked for the upcoming weekend, and the family members spent the evening packing personal files into cardboard boxes under the supervision of palace security officers. The legal lines were now completely absolute. The properties were reclaimed, and the new king's boundary lines were firmly established before the evening briefing concluded. The administrative network that had allowed Camilla's family to live within the royal perimeter was entirely dismantled in a single morning. The next phase of the transition was already taking shape inside the main administrative offices of Buckingham Palace, where Queen Catherine's new team was preparing to execute a massive audit of the sovereign jewelry vaults. The California quarantine. A legal courier van pulled up outside the security gates of a private compound in Montecito, California, at exactly 8 a.m. Pacific time. The driver bypassed the standard package drop, ringing the secure intercom system until a private security guard emerged to sign the delivery manifest. The package contained an official, red-ribbon duplicate of the newly registered London decree. Prince Harry received the document at his kitchen island, laying the crisp pages flat next to his tablet. The text bore the fresh signature of the new king. The document established a rigid, permanent wall around the commercial use of the royal identity overseas. Under the newly modified sovereign statutes, any individual living outside the active working core of the monarchy faces immediate legal penalties for utilizing official titles, family crests, or palace imagery to secure corporate sponsorships. The decree explicitly targeted foreign entertainment contracts, establishing an automatic global quarantine on the family's historic brand. The rules applied directly to anyone operating outside the direct command of the British state. The tension turned concrete when Harry's legal team reviewed the specific penalty clauses on the second page. The new king had tied the enforcement mechanism directly to the distribution of private family trust revenues. If any exiled or non-working relative violates the commercial branding restrictions, their remaining financial allocations from the historic UK family estates face an automatic, temporary freeze by the High Court executors. The financial line was severed from the palace completely, leaving the California household with zero administrative recourse. The California legal team spent 4 hours on an encrypted conference call with constitutional experts in London to find a loophole in the text. They discovered that the document had been structurally integrated with standard international trademark protection laws. This meant the new king's team could legally file immediate cease and desist orders against any global streaming platform or book publisher attempting to market content using unauthorized royal imagery. The legal shield was global, active, and fully enforceable in foreign courts. This brings us to a major financial mystery within the family's international trademark registry. The London auditors discovered that a private corporate entity registered in Delaware had quietly attempted to patent several historical family phrases just months before the accession. The phrases included titles traditionally reserved for senior Commonwealth ambassadors. The palace accountants had historically overlooked these minor filings, viewing them as routine commercial branding attempts by the California branch. The puzzle was quickly solved when the legal team traced the corporate registration codes back to a private media consultancy firm based in Los Angeles. The previous administration had maintained a passive stance toward these minor commercial projects, allowing the Sussexes to expand their brand without formal intervention from the palace lawyers. King William's new decree completely reversed this policy. The new king used his very first afternoon to issue an absolute global nullification order against the Delaware filings, reclaiming the exclusive trademark rights for the crown. This rapid legal intervention created an immediate operational crisis for the Sussexes' upcoming media projects. Their production team had spent 3 months designing a new global lifestyle brand that relied heavily on using stylized versions of their historic family monograms on commercial merchandise. With the new global quarantine active, the manufacturing contracts were frozen instantly. The design teams had to pull the products from the pre-sale pipelines by mid-afternoon, forcing them to completely reinvent the brand image under a strict deadline. The day ended with a quiet, formal notice sent from the Lord Chamberlain's office to the Central Passport Depository in London. The directive ordered the immediate cancellation of the specialized diplomatic transit credentials previously issued to non-working family members for international travel. From that moment on, any travel outside the United States would require standard civilian documentation. The physical markers of royal status were systematically stripped away, ensuring that the distance between the two households remained absolute and permanent. The legal lines were now completely absolute. The financial quarantine was finished, and the new king's international boundary lines were firmly established before the evening came to an end. The parallel networks of influence that had operated in the background of the court for a decade were entirely dismantled in a single morning. The next phase of the transition was already taking shape back in London, where Queen Catherine's new administrative team was preparing to execute a comprehensive audit of the sovereign jewelry vaults. Catherine's ultimate shield. The heavy iron door of the Buckingham Palace Central Registry closed with a solid click at 5 in the afternoon. Queen Catherine walked into the narrow room, accompanied by her new legal director. A line of blue cardboard binders sat on the long metal table under the fluorescent lights. These binders contained the definitive registry of all active properties and assets within the sovereign's private holdings. Catherine sat down at the head of the table, pulling the first binder toward her chair. She opened the cover to review the fresh biometric lock logs. The legal mechanism under review was the new Sovereign Trust Act. This statute allowed the reigning queen to assume absolute independent control over the scheduling and security of the family's state apartments. The midnight warrant signed by King William had formally transferred this authority out of the hands of the Central Privy Purse Committee. The old system was dead. From this afternoon forward, the allocation of royal space, state security clearance tokens, and central vault keys was governed strictly by Catherine's independent office. The physical application of this shield hit the palace transport office by 5:30. A senior driver arrived at the loading bay with a requisition form requesting an estate vehicle for a private family event in Wiltshire. The administrative assistant checked the new console database. The screen immediately flashed a red warning code: authorization denied. The old system that allowed extended family members to check out vehicles on an informal basis was deactivated. The driver had to return the keys to the central safe, leaving the transport team to cancel the shipment route entirely. The rapid implementation of these security locks caused immediate confusion in the upper galleries of the palace. A team of external contractors arrived to update the decorative fixtures in the private guest wings. Catherine's new security director blocked them at the lift doors. He presented a certified copy of the morning decree, which ordered an immediate halt to all non-essential renovation and spending within the palace walls. The contractors were forced to pack their toolboxes and leave the building, their access passes deactivated before they reached the front courtyard gates. This sudden administrative takeover changed the operational landscape of the court before sunset. The public often views the royal household as an entity governed by slow-moving traditions and polite family agreements. In reality, the management of the court relies entirely on active, signed legal orders. Queen Catherine's swift consolidation of the registry proved that the new administration would eliminate every remaining pocket of casual court privilege. The symbolic and physical resources of the monarchy were being pulled back into a strict, unified command structure that answered exclusively to the direct line of succession. The mystery surrounding this rapid vault takeover deepened when the appraisers reached the lower storage drawers. The master inventory list from 1997 showed that a specific collection of historic gold pocket watches had been gifted to the family by a foreign head of state. When the compliance officers opened the designated wooden box, the items were missing from their velvet slots. In their place sat a brief handwritten note signed by a former manager from the previous administration, indicating the items had been moved to a private residence in London. The puzzle was quickly solved when the security team checked the electronic tracking logs of the palace courier service. The watches had been checked out under an old loophole that classified historic gifts as disposable family property. King William's new warrant had explicitly closed this loophole, reclassifying all foreign state gifts as unalienable assets of the crown. The administrative director issued an immediate reclamation order, forcing the return of the items to the central palace vault within 60 minutes. The items were safely locked back behind the biometric sensors before the evening came to an end. This rapid recovery sent a clear warning through the lower levels of the household staff. Several traditional courtiers who had managed the estate logistics under the previous administration realized that their informal methods were completely obsolete. They could no longer slide minor expenses through the general accounts or grant special favors to extended family members. The new Queen's team operated with complete corporate transparency, tracking every penny and every asset with digital precision. The old guard was entirely neutralized by the speed of the transition. The day ended with a quiet meeting between Catherine and her principal communications officer. They reviewed the updated digital layout for the official royal platforms. Every trace of the previous administration's parallel network of influence had been scrubbed from the active site menus. The new digital portal focused entirely on the working core of the family, projecting an image of absolute stability and streamlined authority. The legal lines were drawn, the physical treasures were secure, and the new queen had successfully constructed an unassailable fortress around the future of the crown. At exactly 8 in the evening, a lone administrative clerk walked out of the sovereign's entrance, carrying a final box of shredded network logs to a secure recycling vehicle. Inside the castle, the frantic energy of the day's purges had settled into a heavy, watchful silence. King William remained in his private study, his desk cleared of the morning's warrants, while the first electronic situation report from the Metropolitan Police's royalty unit bounced onto his tablet screen. The entire physical and digital layout of the British court had been completely reset in less than 24 hours. The legal reality of this new era was finalized when the High Court executors officially stamped the closing appendices of the Midnight Decree. Under the strict terms of the new Governance Act, any future request for an administrative review by extended family members was barred from entering the standard judicial system. The king had successfully ring-fenced his executive decisions, rendering them completely immune to internal family litigation or proxy appeals through friendly politicians. The absolute boundary line between the working core of the monarchy and those living on its outer edges was now a permanent feature of British constitutional law. The true finality of the transition became visible as the palace clock struck midnight across London. The IT teams at St. James's Palace completed the physical removal of the old administration's encrypted network nodes, permanently ending a generation of backdoor court influence. The parallel systems of favor and private subsidy were entirely starved of their funding, leaving the extended family to navigate their new civilian realities without a single shred of state support. The long constitutional chess game was over. The legal fortresses were fully armed, and King William and Queen Catherine stood at the absolute center of a modernized, uncompromising House of Windsor. The fast-paced updates executed during King William's first hours have done more than just streamline the household staff. They have permanently rewritten the boundary lines of royal authority. By establishing Queen Catherine as the absolute guardian of the palace registries and the sovereign vaults, the new reign has successfully built an airtight legal shield around the direct line of succession. The old network of casual court privilege is gone, and the era of absolute discipline is officially underway.